My name is Michelle, and at 65 years old, I never expected to start my life over. After 40 years of sacrificing everything as a single mother, working multiple jobs to give my daughter Diana the best life possible, I overheard words that shattered my world. Standing in her luxury kitchen, Diana whispered to her husband, "My mom disgusts me." Instead of confronting her, I made a decision that shocked everyone. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit subscribe and join me as I share how betrayal became my unexpected liberation. I became a widow when Diana was just 3 years old. My husband Thomas died suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me alone to raise our beautiful daughter. We had been high school sweethearts with big dreams, but those dreams vanished in an instant. All I had left was Diana and a modest house with a mortgage I could barely afford on my teaching salary. The first few years were the hardest. I would put Diana to bed, then grade papers until midnight, wake up at 4 to deliver newspapers, then get Diana ready for preschool before heading to my teaching job. On weekends, I worked at a local diner to make ends meet. My hands were always cracked and dry from cleaning tables, but I wore that exhaustion like a badge of honor. Every dollar I earned went toward giving Diana opportunities I never had. When Diana showed exceptional intelligence in elementary school, I took on a third job, tutoring in the evenings to afford the private school recommended by her teachers. I would arrive home after Diana was already asleep, kiss her forehead gently and collapse into bed, only to start again a few hours later. But seeing her thrive made every sacrifice worthwhile. Diana was such a loving child back then. She would leave little notes in my lunch bag saying, "You're the best mommy in the world." On Mother's Day, when she was 9, she used her allowance to buy me a small ceramic angel. "This is you, Mom," she said. "My guardian angel. I still have that angel. It's one of the few possessions I kept when I left." As Diana entered her teenage years, I noticed subtle changes. The mall trips became more frequent, and she began comparing our modest home to her friends' larger houses. When I couldn't afford the designer jeans she wanted, she cried for hours. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior, but looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. Diana was accepted to an elite university with a partial scholarship. I was ecstatic but terrified about covering the remaining costs. I refinanced our home, picked up weekend shifts at a nursing home, and depleted the small retirement fund Thomas had left. Diana graduated with honors in business, and I sat in the audience bursting with pride, my hands raw from years of extra work but clapping louder than anyone. It was during college that Diana met Harold, the son of a banking executive. He came from old money with connections to the most exclusive social circles. When they started dating seriously, Diana began to change more dramatically. Her visits home became less frequent. She would make comments about our furniture being quaint and suggest renovations I couldn't afford. Still, I was happy she had found someone who could give her security. When Diana and Harold got engaged, I worked overtime for months to contribute what I could to the wedding. The day Diana told me that Harold's parents would handle everything, I felt both relief and a strange sense of uselessness. At the lavish ceremony, I noticed I was seated far from the main table, almost hidden behind a large floral arrangement. When someone asked who I was, Diana hesitated before saying family friend instead of my mother. I told myself she was just nervous around Harold's sophisticated relatives. I made excuses for her when she forgot to invite me to her housewarming, when she corrected my grammar in front of her friends, when she suggested I take etiquette classes. I believed that my daughter still loved me, that she was just adapting to a new social world. After Diana and Harold purchased their mansion in the suburbs, my invitations to visit became increasingly rare. Each time I did visit, Diana would give me gifts that felt more like corrections, expensive clothes, to replace my outdated wardrobe, cookbooks for proper entertaining, even elocution lesson, gift certificates one Christmas. Each present came with the same message: I wasn't good enough as I was. Still, I treasured the moments when glimpses of my real daughter shone through. When she got her first major promotion, she called me first, excitement bubbling in her voice like when she was little. When she had a miscarriage, 3 years into her marriage, she cried in my arms like a child. These rare moments kept me hoping that our relationship could heal, that the daughter who once thought I hung the moon might return. I continued teaching elementary school, drawing comfort from my students when Diana's visits grew more infrequent. I kept my home modest but filled with warmth. hoping one day Diana would appreciate the values of hard work and sincerity I had tried to instill. I never imagined how completely those hopes would be shattered, or how that shattering would ultimately set me free. Last spring, I received a rare invitation from Diana to attend a dinner party at her home. Harold had recently been promoted to senior vice president at his investment firm, and they were hosting a celebration with his colleagues and their spouses. "It's very important," Mom Diana said over the phone. "These people are influential in Harold's career. Please try to make a good impression." Her words stung, but I was too excited about being included to dwell on it. I spent nearly 2 weeks' grocery money on a new dress for the occasion. It was navy blue with a modest neckline, something I thought would blend in with the wealthy crowd without calling attention to myself. I even splurged on having my hair professionally styled, something I hadn't done since Diana's wedding 8 years earlier. The day of the party, I decided to bake my special lemon cake with fresh berries. Diana had always loved it as a child, requesting it for every birthday until her teenage years. I thought it might be a nice personal touch, a reminder of our happier days together. I carefully placed it in a container and drove the 40 minutes to Diana and Harold's neighborhood, a gated community with manicured lawns and houses that looked like small hotels. When I arrived, Diana answered the door with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was wearing an elegant black dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my mortgage payments. "You're early," she said, looking past me as if hoping no guests had arrived to see me yet. Her eyes fell to the cake container in my hands, and her smile faltered. "Oh, you didn't need to bring anything. The caterer has prepared everything." "I just thought your guests might enjoy my lemon cake. You always loved it," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the sinking feeling in my stomach. Diana took the container with 2 fingers as if it contained something distasteful. "Thanks, but we have a professional dessert service. Maybe the staff can have this in the kitchen." She placed my cake on a side table and quickly ushered me inside before any neighbors could see me standing on her doorstep. The interior of their home always took my breath away, not just with its grandeur but with how impersonal it felt. Designer furniture that looked unused, artwork clearly selected to impress rather than inspire joy. Nothing like the home I had created for Diana, filled with photos, handmade quilts, and mismatched furniture that told our family story. As guests began to arrive, Diana introduced me briefly as Michelle to some, not even mentioning I was her mother. To others she would say, "This is my mother," in a tone that sounded almost apologetic. I tried to engage in conversations, but most of Harold's colleagues seemed to look through me once they realized I wasn't useful for their career advancement. One woman, Sylvia, the wife of Harold's boss, cornered me by the appetizer table. "So what do you do?" she asked, her eyes assessing my dress in a way that made me realize it wasn't as appropriate as I'd hoped. "I'm a 3rd-grade teacher," I replied with the pride I'd always felt in my profession. "Oh, how quaint," she said with a thin smile. "Teaching is such a noble calling for those who choose that path. Our children went to Westfield Academy. Do you know it?" I nodded. "It's an excellent school. Diana attended public school, but she received a wonderful education." I tried to keep the defensiveness from my voice. "Public school, really? And she's done so well for herself. How fascinating." Sylvia's tone suggested she found it more bizarre than fascinating. Diana seemed so refined. Did her father come from a more established background? The implication was clear. Diana couldn't possibly have inherited her sophistication from me. Before I could respond, I accidentally bumped into a server passing with wine glasses. In my attempt to steady myself, I knocked a glass of red wine onto Sylvia's cream-colored designer dress and the expensive Persian rug beneath us. The room seemed to freeze. Sylvia gasped dramatically while Diana rushed over her face, flushed with embarrassment. "Mom, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Sylvia. Please let me help you clean up." She shot me a look of pure mortification before guiding Sylvia toward a bathroom. I grabbed napkins and knelt to blot the wine from the rug, my hands shaking with humiliation. Harold appeared beside me. "Don't worry about it, Michelle. The housekeeper can handle it tomorrow." His words were kind enough, but his expression showed the same embarrassment as Diana's. After helping as much as I could, I retreated to a quiet corner, feeling increasingly invisible as the evening progressed. When dinner was served, I found myself seated at the far end of the table away from Diana and Harold, who sat with the guests of honor. Later, as the party was winding down, I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, wanting a moment away from the judgmental glances. Through the partially open door, I heard Diana and Harold talking in the adjacent butler's pantry. I was about to announce my presence when Diana's words froze me in place. That was so embarrassing. Did you see her trying to talk to Mr. Jameson about investment strategies and bringing that homemade cake like we're having some church potluck? Harold's response was quieter, something about me trying to be helpful. Then came the words that would change everything. My mom disgusts me. She's so embarrassing. I wish I could just erase her from my life. Every time she visits, I'm terrified she'll do something to ruin everything we've built. Did you see Sylvia's face? We'll never be invited to the Palmers' summer home now. I stood there, glass of water in hand, feeling as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. 40 years of love and sacrifice reduced to disgust and shame. The daughter I had given my life for wanted to erase me from hers. Somehow I managed to set down the glass without breaking it. I returned to the dining room, maintaining a calm expression while my heart splintered inside my chest. For the rest of the evening, I smiled and nodded, at appropriate times, a skill I had perfected at parent-teacher conferences over decades. When it was finally time to leave, Diana walked me to the door with obvious relief. "Thanks for coming, Mom," she said mechanically. I hugged her, and for a moment I held on tighter than usual, wondering if this would be the last time I embraced my daughter. "I love you, Diana," I said. "Love you too," she replied automatically, already looking past me to the remaining guests. On the drive home alone in the dark, I finally allowed the tears to come. They weren't the angry, hot tears of immediate hurt, but the deep, soul-wrenching sobs of a wound decades in the making. By the time I pulled into my driveway, a strange calm had settled over me. I had heard the truth, and now I had to decide what to do with it. That night I couldn't sleep. The words "my mom disgusts me" echoed in my mind like a cruel soundtrack. Around 2 a.m, I got up and went to the hall closet where I kept old photo albums. I pulled out the one labeled Diana Ages 1 to 5 and sat cross-legged on my living room floor, something my arthritic knees protested against. The first photo showed Thomas holding newborn Diana in the hospital, his face filled with a joy he'd never lived to see fulfilled. The next pages chronicled our daughter's early years, her first steps, first day of preschool, playing in sprinklers in our tiny backyard. Diana looking up at me with complete adoration as I read her bedtime stories. Diana wearing my 2 big shoes and declaring she wanted to be just like Mommy when she grew up. What happened to that little girl? When did love turn to disgust? I moved to the next album, Diana Middle School. Here was where things began to change. I found a photo of Diana at 12, frowning because I couldn't afford the expensive summer camp her friends attended. Another showed her 13th birthday, where she had cried because I bought the wrong brand of jeans. The smile in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a calculating look I had chosen not to see. As I flipped through high school photos, I remembered specific sacrifices that now felt foolish. When Diana needed braces, I had sold my wedding ring to cover the portion insurance wouldn't pay. The dentist had suggested the basic metal option, but Diana had cried about looking like a robot, so I found a way to afford the clear ones. That Christmas, I had gone without heat in the house for 2 months to catch up on bills. During her junior year, Diana wanted to study abroad in France. I took a night shift job at a 24-hour pharmacy to pay for it, sleeping only 4 hours a day for 6 months. When she returned, she spoke with a slight French accent for weeks and complained that American food was too processed. She brought back souvenirs for her friends, but nothing for me. At the time, I told myself she had been too busy experiencing Europe to think about gifts. College was when I began to feel truly invisible. Parents' weekend came and went without an invitation. When I called, Diana would rush off the phone, always late for sorority events or study groups. I drove up unannounced once, only to have Diana introduce me to her roommate as my mom from back home, with an embarrassed glance, as if being from our modest suburb was shameful. As I continued through the albums, a disturbing pattern emerged. While I had thousands of photos of Diana, she had almost none of me. In the rare pictures where we appeared together, she was always slightly turned away, creating distance. Her body language spoke volumes about her growing embarrassment of me. I found the program from Diana's wedding and noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the acknowledgments, Diana thanked Harold's parents for being the perfect role models of sophistication and success. There was no mention of me, not even the standard thanks to my mother for her support. I had been erased even then, years before the words made it explicit. My mind drifted to the wedding itself. I had saved for months to buy a mother of the bride dress from a department store, only to have Diana arrange for a stylist to take me shopping 2 days before the ceremony. "We want you to feel special too, Mom," she had said, but what she meant was that my choice wasn't good enough for her perfect day. During the reception, Harold's mother had cornered me, champagne glass in hand. "Diana is such a lovely girl," she had said. "It's remarkable how well she turned out considering her 2 circumstances." The way she said circumstances made it clear she meant growing up with me. Around 4 in the morning, I stumbled upon something that took my breath away. A Facebook post from 3 years ago that I had somehow missed. One of Diana's college friends had commented on a photo of Diana and Harold at a charity gala. "Your mom must be so proud," Diana's response. "My mom passed away when I was young. Harold's parents have been like parents to me." I had to read it 3 times to believe it. My daughter had killed me off in her narrative, replaced me with in-laws who fit better into the story she wanted to tell about herself. All while I was very much alive, still sending birthday cards with $50 bills tucked inside that she never acknowledged. By dawn, my pain had crystallized into something sharper. I began to see how I had enabled Diana's entitlement and cruelty. Every time I accepted her dismissive behavior, every time I made excuses for her coldness, I had taught her that treating me poorly was acceptable. I had been so afraid of losing her love that I had lost my own dignity in the process. The physical toll of my relationship with Diana suddenly became clear too. The persistent headaches I experienced before and after her rare visits. The stress-induced shingles I developed after that disastrous Thanksgiving when she criticized every dish I prepared. The weight I had lost from anxiety when she went 6 months without returning my calls, only to reappear when she needed help planning her anniversary party. I realized I had spent thousands of dollars I couldn't afford trying to maintain a relationship with a daughter who wished I didn't exist. Money for flights to visit her when she never reciprocated. Expensive gifts I thought might impress her charged to credit cards I was still paying off. Even the recent dress for the dinner party had meant eating ramen noodles for 2 weeks to balance my budget. As the morning light filtered through my curtains, I looked around my modest home. It was nothing like Diana's mansion, but it was filled with warmth and memories. I had raised a child here, taught generations of students, built a life of meaning despite limited means. Why had I allowed Diana to make me feel that none of that mattered, because I couldn't afford crystal stemware or vacations in the Hamptons? For the first time, I allowed myself to feel angry. Not the fleeting irritation I had permitted myself over the years before quickly suppressing it with maternal guilt, but a deep cleansing rage at being devalued and discarded after giving everything I had. This anger didn't burn, it clarified. Through it, I began to see a path forward that had nothing to do with earning Diana's approval. As I put away the photo albums, I made a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table watching the birds at the feeder outside my window. A thought that had been forming in the shadows of my mind all night finally emerged into the light. What if I stopped organizing my life around a relationship that brought only pain? What if at 65 years old I finally lived for myself? The morning after the dinner party, my phone rang. Diana's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered, half hoping for an apology I knew wouldn't come. "Mom," Diana said without preamble, "we need to talk about last night." "Yes, we do," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "That wine spill was really unfortunate. Sylvia's dress was a Valentino, and the rug is an antique Persian that Harold's parents gave us as a housewarming gift." No mention of her hurtful words, no acknowledgement of how I'd been treated. Of course. "I'm sorry about the accident," I said. "These things happen at parties." "These things happen to you, Mom, and it's becoming a pattern that's really concerning to Harold and me." I closed my eyes. "What exactly are you saying, Diana?" There was a pause, then she continued, in what I recognized as her business negotiation voice. "I think it would be best if we limited our interactions to more controlled environments. Maybe lunch, just the 2 of us, where we can work on some of your social skills." "My social skills," I repeated flatly. "Yes. Harold knows an excellent coach who helps people improve their public presentation. She works with corporate executives, but I'm sure she could help you too. We'd cover the cost, of course." The implication that I needed to be fixed, to be worthy of my daughter's company, was the final straw. But instead of expressing my hurt, I made a split-second decision to play along while my mind raced ahead to what I was beginning to consider. "That's thoughtful of you, Diana. Let me think about it." She seemed surprised by my easy acquiescence. "Really? That's great, Mom. I thought you'd be defensive." "No, I want us to have a good relationship," I said, amazed at how calm I sounded while my heart pounded. "In fact, I've been thinking about making some other changes, too." "What kind of changes?" She sounded cautiously optimistic, probably imagining a makeover or elocution lessons. "Just some personal improvements. Nothing to worry about. I'll let you know once I've sorted things out." After hanging up, I sat motionless for several minutes, the decision crystallizing in my mind with surprising clarity. Then I picked up the phone again and called my friend Judy, who had been a realtor for 30 years. "Judy, I'm thinking of selling my house, quietly and quickly. Is that possible?" Judy's surprise was audible. "Your house? But you've lived there since Diana was a baby. What's going on, Michelle?" "It's time for a change," I said simply. "Can we meet today to discuss it?" 3 hours later, sitting in Judy's office, I learned something that seemed like cosmic timing. My modest neighborhood had become highly desirable in recent years, as young professionals were priced out of trendier areas. Properties were selling well above asking price, often with cash offers. "Michelle, you could get at least 3 times what you paid for this place," Judy said, showing me comparable sales. "Even more if you did some updates, but that would take time." "I don't want updates. I want speed and privacy. No yard sign, no open houses, no publicity." Judy studied me, concern in her eyes. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No," I assured her. "I'm actually trying to get out of trouble and into freedom." She nodded slowly. "I have a young couple first-time buyers. The husband is a teacher at your school, actually, Jacob Miller. They've been outbid 3 times and are getting desperate. They couldn't afford your house at full market value, but if you're prioritizing a quick, quiet sale..." "Jacob is wonderful with his students. I mentored him his first year," I said, feeling the first piece of my plan fall into place. "Let's talk numbers." From Judy's office, I went straight to my bank and met with a financial advisor. The news continued to be surprisingly positive. Between my teacher's pension, Social Security, modest savings, and the potential profit from the house sale, I could actually afford to make a dramatic life change. "If you're looking to relocate to a lower-cost area, you could live quite comfortably," the advisor told me. "You've always been frugal, and it's paying off now." That afternoon, I went home and began researching places I had always wanted to visit. The Oregon coast had called to me ever since I read a novel set there in my 20s. Houses and apartments were available for far less than property in my current city. There were community colleges where I might teach part-time art centers and book clubs. A real community where I might be valued for who I was, not judged for who I wasn't. The next day, I began the process of carefully separating myself from the life I had known. I sorted through my possessions, identifying the few things that truly mattered: my grandmother's quilt, my wedding photo, selected pictures of Diana from happier times, and the ceramic angel she had given me. Everything else could be replaced, or more likely wasn't needed at all. I found a box containing improvement gifts Diana had given me over the years. An expensive handbag, so you won't have to carry that awful tote designer clothing, with tags still attached because they never felt like me, a self-help book called Elevating Your Social Presence. I packed these to sell or donate. The money would fund my new beginning. I visited my doctor for a checkup and prescription refills. "Your blood pressure is lower than it's been in years," she remarked. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." "I'm making a big change," I told her, starting fresh. "At your age?" she asked, then caught herself. "I'm sorry that sounded judgmental." "It's a common reaction," I said. "But why should starting over be only for the young? I have more clarity now than I've ever had." I contacted the school principal to tender my resignation, explaining I would finish the school year but not return in the fall. He was disappointed but understanding. "You've given so much to our students, Michelle. You deserve this retirement." Little by little, I disentangled myself from the life I had built around being available for a daughter who didn't want me. I canceled standing lunch dates with friends who were really Diana's conduits, providing her information about my life. I closed social media accounts, where she could track my activities. I began to create space between my past and my future. Through it all, I maintained normal phone contact with Diana, never letting on what was happening. She called twice that week, suddenly attentive now that she had an improvement project to manage. I deflected questions about my activities and kept conversations brief. The most painful moment came when I visited Thomas's grave. I hadn't been a regular visitor over the years, preferring to honor him by raising our daughter well. Now I stood before his headstone feeling I had failed him somehow. "I did my best," I whispered, "but I can't do it anymore. I need to find out who Michelle is outside of being Diana's mother." A warm breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and I chose to take it as his blessing. 1 week after Diana's dinner party, Judy called with news. Jacob and his wife Alyssa wanted the house and could close quickly with help from Alyssa's parents. They were offering slightly below what we might get on the open market, but were happy to accommodate my unusual requests. A short closing period, the option for me to rent back for 1 month, while finalizing my plans and complete confidentiality. "They're good people," Michelle Judy said. "They want to raise their family here. The house will be filled with love again." That night I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to Diana. I rewrote it 7 times, struggling to find words that expressed my hurt without bitterness, my decision without accusation. The final version was simple but honest. "Dear Diana, by the time you read this, I will have begun a new chapter of my life. I overheard your words at the dinner party, 'My mom disgusts me.' I wish I could erase her from my life. I want you to know I have loved you completely from the moment you were born. Every sacrifice I made was given freely with no regrets. But I cannot continue to be someone who disgusts you. I cannot keep trying to earn the love that should be freely given. So I am setting us both free. I have sold the house and am moving somewhere new to discover who I am beyond being your mother. I am not telling you where I'm going because I need this time and space for myself. Perhaps someday if you wish to find me you can, but only if you are ready to see me for who I truly am and value what I truly offer. I wish you well, Diana. I hope you find happiness and someday understanding. With eternal love, Mom." As I sealed the envelope, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. At 65 years old, I was about to leap into the unknown. But for the first time in decades, I was choosing myself, and that made all the difference. The next 3 weeks passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of preparation and pretense. The sale of my house proceeded smoothly with paperwork signed in Judy's office away from curious eyes. Jacob and Alyssa were respectful of my privacy, asking few questions about my sudden decision to sell. "We're just so grateful," Alyssa said. "This house is everything we hoped for." I set up a new bank account at a different institution, arranging for my pension and Social Security to be redirected after my move. I created a new email address and purchased a prepaid phone to use once I left. Small steps toward independence that felt both terrifying and thrilling. Diana called every few days, each conversation focused on her plans for my improvement. She had scheduled an appointment with the social coach, selected several restaurants where she could teach me proper dining etiquette, and even mentioned a subtle cosmetic procedure that might refresh my appearance. I made non-committal responses, while silently packing boxes during our calls. "You sound different, Mom," she remarked during one conversation. "More, I don't know, agreeable." "Just reflecting on some things," I said. "Change can be good." "Exactly, that's what I've been saying. I'm so glad you're finally open to feedback." What Diana couldn't see was how each box I packed represented another piece of my life I was reclaiming. I sold furniture I had kept, only because Diana might someday want it. I donated clothes I had worn to try to fit into her world. I shredded old credit card statements showing purchases made to impress a daughter who was never impressed. I maintained my teaching responsibilities with renewed energy, knowing these were my final weeks with students I had grown to love. I arranged for my classroom library to be left behind and wrote individualized notes for each child about their special qualities to be delivered after my departure. One Saturday, while carefully wrapping the ceramic angel Diana had given me years ago, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Michelle, it's Tara. Ran into Diana at the salon yesterday. She mentioned you're making some changes. Everything okay?" Tara was Diana's friend from high school who had remained casually in touch with me. The fact that Diana was discussing me with her sent a jolt of concern through me. I texted back casually. Just the usual spring cleaning and retirement planning. Nothing exciting. An hour later, Diana called. Mom, Tara said you mentioned retirement. Are you thinking of stopping teaching? I had prepared for this, just exploring options for the next few years. Nothing decided yet. Without discussing it with me, Diana sounded genuinely surprised, as if major life decisions required her approval. It's preliminary, I assured her. How was the charity luncheon yesterday? The deflection worked, and Diana launched into a detailed account of her social triumph the moment of potential discovery passed. But I knew I needed to accelerate my timeline. Word was beginning to spread, and Diana's network of friends could easily discover the house sale if I wasn't careful. I contacted the moving company I had hired under the pretense of downsizing to a condo and arranged for an earlier pickup date. I found a furnished rental in a small coastal Oregon town through an agency that specialized in longer-term vacation properties. 3-month minimum, the agent told me. Will that work for your situation? Perfect, I replied. I need time to find something permanent. I booked a one-way flight using my maiden name, which I had maintained as my middle name on my driver's license. Not to hide my identity, but to begin separating from the person I had been. Michelle Thomas had been defined by her relationship to her daughter. Michelle Collins would define herself. The night before the movers came, I walked through each room of the house where I had lived for over 40 years, the kitchen where I had taught Diana to bake cookies, the living room where we had built blanket forts during thunderstorms, the small backyard where she had practiced cartwheels and I had graded papers on summer afternoons. I ran my hands along the height marks on the doorframe, charting Diana's growth. I couldn't take this physical evidence of our shared history with me, but I took photos to preserve the memory. Jacob and Alyssa had promised to retain the marks, incorporating them into their own family's story. That final night, I slept on a mattress on the floor of what had been my bedroom. My few remaining possessions were packed in 2 suitcases and several boxes ready for shipping. The house echoed with emptiness, but my heart felt surprisingly full. The terror of such drastic change remained, but it was now balanced by anticipation. In the morning, I placed Diana's letter on the kitchen counter where she would find it when she inevitably came looking for me. Beside it, I left the spare key she had rarely used, and a small photo album containing pictures of us from happier times. Then I took one last look around, whispered a goodbye to the home that had sheltered so many versions of myself, and walked out the door toward an uncertain but chosen future. The flight to Oregon felt symbolic in every way. As the plane lifted off, I watched my city grow smaller below me, years of obligation and hurt receding with the landscape. For the first time in decades, no one knew where I was or what I was doing. The anonymity was both frightening and exhilarating. I had booked a small rental car at the airport and followed directions to the coastal town of Sandpoint. The drive took me through forests of towering pines before opening suddenly to breathtaking ocean views. When I caught my first glimpse of the Pacific stretching endlessly to the horizon, tears sprang to my eyes. This vastness represented the possibilities ahead of me. My rental cottage sat on a bluff overlooking the beach, a compact one-bedroom with weathered blue siding and a small deck. It was nothing like my old home or Diana's mansion, but when I turned the key and stepped inside, I felt a sense of rightness I hadn't experienced in years. That first evening, I sat on the deck watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I had brought a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to arrive in my old life. I poured a glass, raised it to the horizon, and made a toast to myself, to Michelle. May she discover who she is meant to be. Meanwhile, I knew Diana would be discovering my absence. I had turned off my old phone, but I could imagine the progression confusion when I didn't answer calls, irritation at what she would perceive as irresponsibility, then alarm when she went to my house and found it empty except for the probably BEBEPE letter. I felt guilty about the worry I was causing, but reminded myself that this clean break was necessary for both of us. My first week in Sandpoint was devoted to simple pleasures I had denied myself for years. I slept until I naturally woke without an alarm for the first time since Diana was born. I walked barefoot on the beach collecting shells and watching pelicans dive for fish. I ate meals when I was hungry, not according to a schedule dictated by work or others' expectations. The second week, I began to venture into town. Sandpoint was small but vibrant, with locally owned shops and restaurants lining the main street. At a coffee shop called Tidal Grounds, I ordered a latte and sat alone at a window table watching people pass by. In my old life, I would have felt self-conscious dining alone. Here it felt like freedom. First time in Sandpoint, the barista asked when he brought my drink. "Is it that obvious?" I smiled. "We just don't get many newcomers in the off-season. I'm Ethan." "Michelle," I replied, the simple introduction feeling revolutionary. Not Diana's mother or Mrs. Thomas from the elementary school, just Michelle. "Well, Michelle, welcome to our little corner of the coast. If you need recommendations for anything, just ask." That brief, friendly interaction led to others. I discovered the local library hosted a book club for second-half adventurers, people over 50 exploring new phases of life. I joined hesitantly, wondering if I would fit in, only to find a group of women and men who had all made significant life changes later in life. There was Grace, who had left a corporate career to open a bakery after her divorce. Martin, who moved to the coast to paint landscapes after his children were grown. And Sophia, who had walked away from a toxic family dynamic at 60 to finally start living, as she put it. "It takes courage to choose yourself," Sophia told me, after I shared a carefully edited version of my story. "Most people never do it at any age." During my third week, I received an email from Judy. "Diana came looking for you. She was upset about the house sale. I honored your wishes for privacy, but told her you were safe. She's hired someone to find you. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" I replied simply, "I'm more than okay. I'm finding myself. Thank you for your help and discretion." It was inevitable that Diana would try to track me down. Part of me had hoped she might respect my wishes for space, but I knew her controlling nature too well. I wasn't hiding exactly, but I wasn't making it easy either. This time was for me, not for managing her feelings or meeting her expectations. As weeks turned into months, I established routines that nourished rather than depleted me. Morning walks on the beach, afternoon reading on my deck, evening gatherings with new friends who accepted me without judgment. I enrolled in a watercolor class at the community center, something I had always wanted to try but never made time for. My first paintings were terrible splodges of color that barely resembled the seascapes I was attempting to capture, but my instructor, an elderly man named Frank, encouraged me to focus on the process rather than the result. "You've spent your life being useful," he observed, as I fretted over a particularly unsuccessful attempt. "Art isn't about usefulness, it's about expression. What are you trying to say with this painting?" I stared at the blur of blues and grays on my paper. "That I'm still learning who I am." He nodded approvingly. "Then it's perfect exactly as at Island." 4 months into my new life, I was sitting in Tidal Grounds working on a crossword puzzle when someone slid into the chair across from me. I looked up, already smiling at what I assumed was one of my new friends, only to find myself staring into Diana's face. "Hello, Mom," she said. I carefully set down my pencil, my heart racing, but my exterior calm. "Hello, Diana." She looked both angry and bewildered, designer sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly styled hair, expression tight with contained emotion. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through? I thought you were dead." "I filed a missing persons report. I hired a private investigator." "I left a letter," I said quietly. I explained that I needed space. "Space? You sold our family home without telling me and disappeared across the country. That's not space, that's abandonment." The old Michelle would have immediately apologized, would have tried to soothe Diana's hurt feelings regardless of her own, but I was no longer that woman. "I heard what you said at your dinner party, Diana. About how I disgust you. About wanting to erase me from your life. I simply did what you wanted." Her face flushed. I was just frustrated. You can't upend everything over one comment. It wasn't one comment. It was years of comments, actions, and choices that showed how you really felt about me. The dinner party was just when I finally listened. Diana glanced around the coffee shop, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in public. "Can we go somewhere private to talk?" I considered refusing but nodded. "We can go to my cottage. I'm renting a place nearby." The walk to my rental was silent tension stretching between us. Once inside, Diana surveyed the small, simply furnished space with obvious disdain. This is where you've been living. It's tiny." "It's perfect for me," I replied. "Would you like some tea?" She declined and paced the small living area while I prepared a cup for myself, buying time to steady my nerves. When I sat down, Diana remained standing, looking down at me, as if preparing to deliver a lecture. "Mom, I understand you were hurt. But this extreme reaction isn't healthy. You need to come home." "This is my home now, Diana, at least for now." "What about your job? Your friends? Your responsibilities?" "I retired. I've made new friends. My only responsibility now is to myself." Diana's composure cracked slightly. "What about your responsibility to me? I'm your daughter." "You're 35 years old, Diana. You have a successful career, a wealthy husband, a beautiful home. You don't need me, and according to your own words, you don't want me either." "That's not fair," she protested. "Everyone says things they don't mean when they're stressed." I took a sip of my tea, gathering my thoughts. "The thing is, Diana, I think you did mean it. Not because you're cruel, but because over the years you've built an image of who you want to be, and I don't fit into that image. I represent a past you'd rather forget." Diana sank onto the sofa, her defensive posture collapsing. "You make me sound horrible." "I don't think you're horrible. I think you're human. We all want to control how others see us. But I couldn't keep pretending that being treated as an embarrassment wasn't destroying me." For several minutes we sat in silence, broken only by the distant sound of waves. Finally, Diana spoke, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. "I don't know how to fix this." "I'm not sure it needs fixing," I replied gently. "Maybe it just needs honesty. For both of us." Over the next few hours, we talked more openly than we had in decades. Diana admitted to the shame she had felt about our modest circumstances growing up, the pressure she felt in Harold's social circle, and her fear that her background would be discovered. "I created this perfect narrative about my life," she confessed, "and after a while I couldn't tell the difference between the story and reality." I shared how her rejection had felt the pain of being erased from her life story, the years of trying to be someone I wasn't to earn her approval. There were tears, difficult silences, and moments of genuine connection. No magical resolution, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. When Diana left that evening to return to her hotel, we agreed to proceed slowly. She would return to her life, and I would continue with mine. We would communicate on more equal terms without expectations or obligations. As I watched her walk away, I felt neither the desperate need to cling to her that had defined our relationship for so long, nor the bitter relief of severance I had felt upon leaving. Instead, I felt the quiet strength of someone who had found her own worth, independent of others' validation. That night I stood on my deck looking at stars that seemed brighter on this coast than they had ever appeared before. I was still Michelle the mother, but now I was also Michelle the watercolor student, Michelle the beach walker, Michelle the book club member, Michelle the survivor. Most importantly, I was Michelle who had finally learned that sometimes walking away isn't an end, but the bravest possible beginning. 1 year passed, then another. I continued to rent my little blue cottage, eventually signing a longer lease when the opportunity arose. Sandpoint had become more than a refuge. It was home in a way my previous house had never truly been. I had built a life filled with meaningful friendships, creative pursuits, and a hard-won sense of peace. My watercolor paintings progressed from embarrassing blobs to recognizable seascapes. Frank, my instructor, convinced me to include 2 pieces in the community art fair. To my astonishment, both sold. "Told you," he said with a wink. "You were an artist all along. Just needed permission to be imperfect." I began volunteering at an after-school program, using my teaching skills to help children with reading difficulties. It fulfilled my need to contribute without consuming my identity. 3 days a week I was Miss Michelle, to a group of enthusiastic elementary students. The rest of the time I was simply myself. Diana and I established a new kind of relationship built on cautious honesty rather than unspoken expectations. We exchanged monthly emails at first, then occasional phone calls. She shared genuine news about her life rather than curated highlights designed to impress. I told her about my new activities without seeking approval or downplaying my happiness. Our conversations had awkward moments and sometimes painful honesty, but they were real in a way our interactions hadn't been for decades. Diana admitted that Harold's family had never truly accepted her despite her efforts to fit in, and that the perfect life she had constructed was cracking under the pressure of constant performance. "I think I've been chasing something that doesn't exist," she confided during one call. "This ideal of perfection that keeps moving further away the closer I get." "That's a painful realization," I said, resisting the urge to offer solutions or brush away her discomfort as I would have done in the past. "You seem so content now," she observed. "How did you find that?" "By stopping the chase," I replied. "By accepting who I am instead of who I thought I should be." In the spring of my 3rd year in Oregon, Diana asked if she could visit. Not to convince me to return or to check up on me, but simply to spend time together in my new world. I agreed with both anticipation and trepidation. She arrived on a sunny April morning, dressed more casually than I had seen her in years. Jeans, a simple sweater, minimal makeup. She embraced me without the stiff formality that had characterized our physical contact for so long. "You look wonderful," she said, and for once I believed the compliment was genuine rather than an assessment of whether I met her standards. Over the next 5 days, I showed Diana my Sandpoint life. We walked the beaches, browsed local shops, and ate at my favorite seafood restaurant where the owner knew me by name. I introduced her to my friends without anxiety about their modest backgrounds or casual manners. "Your friends are amazing," Diana said after a potluck dinner at Sophia's house. "They're so authentic." "That's what drew me to them," I agreed. "No pretense, no performance." On her final evening, we sat on my deck, watching the sunset, a bottle of local wine between us. Diana seemed to be gathering courage to say something important. "Mom, I found your letter," she finally said. "The one you left when you disappeared. I've read it so many times I've memorized it." I nodded, waiting. "I was so angry at first. Furious that you would just leave, that you would make such a drastic decision based on something you overheard. But the more I read it, the more I understood." She took a deep breath. "What I said at that party, it was unforgivable." "I've forgiven it," I said quietly. "I haven't forgiven myself," Diana replied. "I've been thinking about why I said it, why I felt that way. I think I was terrified." "Of what?" "Of being found out. Of Harold's colleagues realizing I came from a normal middle-class background. Of not belonging in the world I had worked so hard to enter." She twisted her wine glass between her fingers. "But mostly I was afraid of becoming you." The words could have been hurtful, but Diana's expression held no malice, only painful self-awareness. "I watched you sacrifice everything for me," she continued. "Your dreams, your comfort, your identity. You became nothing but Diana's mother, and I swore I would never lose myself like that. But in trying to avoid your fate, I lost myself anyway, just in a different direction." We sat with that truth as the sky darkened and stars appeared above the ocean. "I'm leaving Harold, Diana," said finally. "We've been in counseling, but it's not working. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not, and he can't love the person I actually am." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be. It's scary, but it feels right. Like I'm finally choosing myself." She gave me a sad smile. "I guess I learned that from you in the end." The next morning, I drove Diana to the airport. Our goodbye was warm but not dramatic. We had both learned that relationships, even between mother and daughter, should be chosen rather than obligatory. "I'll email when I'm settled," she said. "Maybe you could visit me next time." "I'd like that," I replied. As I watched her walk toward security, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in her courage, hope for her future, and deep gratitude for my own journey. The pain that had driven me to flee across the country had transformed into the wisdom that now guided both our lives. Back at my cottage, I set up my easel on the deck and began a new painting. Not a seascape this time, but a portrait of a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen both sorrow and joy. My first self-portrait, an acknowledgement of my own worth, separate from any role or relationship. As I worked, the lesson of my journey crystallized with newfound clarity. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what no longer serves us, even when that choice terrifies us. Sometimes we must disappear from others' expectations to finally appear to ourselves. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from someone you loved for your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to my channel for more stories of life's unexpected journeys. And remember to share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself. Thank you for joining me on this path of healing and discovery. Until next time, may you find the courage to write your own next chapter.